Hello, my name is Tony. The Great British Class Divide. What is it and what does it mean? Well, I can tell you how it used to be, and then I'll leave it to you to decide if things have really changed over the years. I suspect not, but others would cite evolving cultural progress, social mobility and social equality having taken leaps and bounds over the decades to establish more parity in society. Bullshit, probably. So, once upon a time, there were three main strata of defined social class: the lower or working class, the middle class, and the upper class. Or, from my perspective, growing up, there was us, the lower class, and them, the middle and upper classes. Now, it was possible with further education and a well-paid job for lower class people to rise through the ranks to join the echelons of the middle class. But neither the working or middle class were ever going to make it to be upper class, because the required alignment, acknowledgement, respect and privilege that goes with it results from an accident of birth. The upper class inherited their status from kings, queens, lords, ladies, rulers, the landed gentry, the aristocracy. It is an exclusive club, and the only way to get in, to really be a part of it, is by being to the manor born, so to speak. You could try marrying into it, buying your way into it, blagging your way into it, but the harsh reality is, unless you are of noble birth or similarly related, you will never truly be a member of the club, the upper class club, not unless heredity decrees it. There is another two classes nowadays, the working poor and the underclass. The working poor are those who work but are flat broke. Financial input doesn't equal output. The underclass is a subclass beneath the working poor. This is an amalgamation of odds and sods, an aggregate of the terminally unemployed, those who have never worked and never will, criminals, gangsters, thugs, terrorists, illegal immigrants, drug addicts, rioters, the homeless, benefits cheats, and so on. And whilst it is possible for any of those to ascend to the ranks of the working poor, working class, or middle class, most don't have that aspiration, don't want to. Like everyone else though, upper class is never going to be an option. So what are the main differences between the upper class and everyone else? Deference and privilege, along with inherited or imagined esteem and status. When they do the same things as any of the other classes, they are perceived and treated differently. We have been told for centuries they're better than us, more important, more deserving, superior beings. As an example, say a member of the royal family falls ill, gets cancer perhaps. Shit happens like lightning. They will get immediate care, attention and treatment of the most excellent caliber available, and the monitoring and aftercare they receive will be second to none. No expense will be spared to save them and maintain their health. Say I get cancer, then there's going to be a delay in establishing a diagnosis for a kickoff. I will be denied access to a GP seen by a nurse first. The nurse will tell me my persistent 4-week-old cough is a virus that will not benefit from the prescription of antibiotics. A month later, after copious blister packs of cheap paracetamol and sticky bottles of cough mixture, feeling no better, I will go back. With some arm twisting and begging, nurse gatekeeper will agree I can be seen by a doctor. Well, maybe, maybe not. Could just tell me to grow up and fuck off and take my wretched hack with me. If I'm lucky, the GP might send me to hospital for an x-ray, or could just tell me to fuck off. If the x-ray shows something suspicious, I could be referred for a scan, or told to fuck off. Then I could get a biopsy. The path lab will test it later, provided they're not too busy with a card game or cooking chips in a Ninja air fryer. Some months will pass and I'll get a diagnosis. Looks like I need an operation to remove a malignant cancerous tumour from my lung. Months pass whilst I await a slot. The operation is cancelled 5 times due to unforeseen circumstances, and more months pass. By the time my operation is due to take place, a further scan is performed. Or if it isn't, they'll just open me up on the table and then just as quickly close me again. Seems the cancer has now spread to all my major organs and surgery is pointless. I am now terminally ill. The oncologist tells me there is nothing more they can do for me, apart from some pain relief and assigning a palliative care nurse to my case. I go home with my morphine sulfate prescription and wait to die. But if I'm the sort of working class stiff or middle class Joseph or Jocasta with a bit of cash to splash, I could pay to see a consultant privately early on, pay for my own operation, pay for my aftercare and chemotherapy, and live to fight another day. So money will bring me closer to the kind of privilege afforded the upper class, but not so close that it will be the same exactly. Because no matter what, I ain't one of them, I'm one of us. Now here's a good one. If an upper-class person falls seriously mentally ill, psychotic no less, they are described as eccentric, and great tolerance and understanding is shown unto them. If a lower-class person becomes psychotic, they are described as mad, nuts, insane, bananas, crazy, a lunatic, and written the fuck off. And that difference, pilgrims, is the key basis for the film The Ruling Class. The rights to adapt Peter Barnes' satirical black comedy stage play of 1968 belonged to actor Peter O'Toole. Director Peter Medak often approached him about making it. One night the two men went on a bender in London, and O'Toole decided, no doubt greased along by a couple of lubricating jars, he at last wanted to go ahead. O'Toole phoned his manager, giving him 24 hours to set it up, like some Roman emperor making a decree. Next day a deal was done and dusted with United Artists. The film got made, and wouldn't you just know it, was a big fat commercial flop. Audiences didn't want to see it, and those who did or wandered in accidentally didn't get it, or just plain didn't like it. Critical reaction was mixed at best. It was even too obscure and unsuccessful to warrant a screening at the cinematic haunt of my youth, the Market Hall in Bryn Mawr, South Wales. That's some achievement. You couldn't score a gig there? What the hell have you done? I only saw it when the BBC ran it in 1974, an act which resulted in some controversy. The unwritten good faith agreement of the day was a full 5 years were to elapse before a feature film could be shown on TV. This was to allow for a suitable window of theatrical opportunity. Producer of The Ruling Class, Jules Buck, dispensed with that, and as a result was boycotted by the UK Cinematograph Exhibitors Association. I don't know if he cared much about that. It's like this channel being boycotted by the Wensleydale Woke Cheesemakers for Christ conglomerate. Yep, I'd be fucking devastated. In pieces, cheesed off. For those who've seen it, this is what you got. For those who didn't see it, this is what you'll get. For those who don't want to see it, why are you wasting your time with this review? Fuck off and do something else, tourist. Eat grass, as they say these days. Sir Ralph Gurney, 13th Earl of Gurney, Harry Andrews, indulges in a little erotic asphyxiation that goes wrong. He ends up accidentally hanging himself in a bedroom at his sprawling, stately home. He's wearing battle dress, sword, and a tutu. He kicks the wooden steps over in error. What a Burke! Ralph's half-brother, Sir Charles William Mervyn, his wife Lady Claire Coral Brown, half-wit MP son Dinsdale James Villiers, and clergyman Bishop Lambton Alistair Sim gather after the funeral with some deep concern over the line of succession. Two of Sir Ralph's sons are dead, so the next in line is Jack, Peter O'Toole. Jack is a little unconventional, to say the least. Not to put too fine a point on it, he is a person with paranoid schizophrenia, and in layman's terms, completely batshit crazy off the chart insane. He resides in a mental institution which he describes variably as a dance studio and a retreat. During the reading of the will, it is revealed that Sir Ralph has left money to some charities and £30,000 to family butler of long-standing Tucker, Arthur Lowe. This gives Tucker the opportunity to indulge his hidden anarchist communist leanings, get drunk and insult everyone, whilst remaining in his position purely to cause chaos and have his say. Everything else, lands and titles, are bequeathed to Jack to do with as he pleases. It soon becomes clear this is a recipe for disaster. When Jack turns up after the reading of the will, he now believes he is the second coming of Christ, that he is God reincarnated on earth. He sleeps upright on a full crucifixion-sized cross, imagines he performs miracles, manically leaps and capers around spouting bizarre philosophy, and breaks into impromptu song and dance routines with a little light opera thrown in. Jack's psychiatrist and Claire's lover, Dr. Herder, Michael Bryant, accurately declares that Jack is 100% full-blown delusional and has retreated from reality to the point
his idea of the world we live in is determined solely by his feelings. What he feels is.
He is what he feels he is. Wow, 52 years later, and doesn't that strike a chord? Who would have predicted, eh? You are what you think you are. The very cornerstone of psychosis, nowadays regarded as some new age truism of self-validation and a blueprint for life. Fucking amazing. Charles decides that either Jack is cured and deemed fit to take up his seat in Parliament as the 14th Earl of Gurney, or diagnosed as hopelessly insane and committed to an institution for life. Taking no chances, Charles coerces his mistress, Grace Caroline Seymour, to work on seducing Jack, marrying him and getting pregnant as soon as possible. Then, if Jack must be committed, Charles and Grace will act as the child's guardian until he is old enough to take over the title, lands and role of Earl. Grace, who has certain obvious charms, most heterosexual men would find very appealing, is successful in both getting married to Jack and getting pregnant. Dr. Herder aims for a cure, but his clinical psychiatric approach doesn't get very far. Jack tells him that all the Rorschach ink blots remind him of God. Failing that, they remind him of ink blots. He beats a polygraph test. As a last resort, Herder brings in another patient, Mikhail Nigel Green, an evangelical Scot who also believes he is Christ, or, as he self-styles, the high-voltage Messiah, capable of channeling electricity through his body as a weapon. Their clash during a thunderstorm results in Jack having a seizure similar to that induced by electroconvulsive therapy. During his coma, he experiences visions of being beaten up by a gorilla in a top hat and tails, as you do. Meanwhile, Grace goes into labour and gives birth to a boy. When Jack regains consciousness, he is a changed man.
I'm Jack. I'm Jack. I'm Jack.
He proclaims emphatically. Everyone takes this to mean he has regained his sanity. Well, not quite. He does believe that he is Jack, only not the Jack everyone thinks. It's Jack the Ripper. Sir Charles ropes in court-appointed psychiatrist Dr. Truscott Graham Crowden to assess Jack, confident he'll be found mentally incapable and dispatched to an institution for life. However, when Truscott discovers Jack is an old Etonian like himself, the elitist nature of the old boys' club supersedes clinical judgment, and he deems Jack completely sane. When Lady Claire makes sexual overtures to Jack, he stabs her to death in a rage, all the while imagining the streets of late Victorian period London around him. Tucker discovers the body, and Jack frames him for the murder. After all, he's a nouveau wealthy, drunk communist anarchist who hates the ruling class. And he did cheer, shout,
"One less! Praise the Lord! Hallelujah!"
and dance with joy when he discovered the corpse. Who better to take the fall? Sir Charles suffers a life-changing stroke. Dr. Herder, upon realising what Jack has done, has a complete nervous collapse. Jack takes up his place in the House of Lords, delivering a firebrand speech filled with jingoistic rhetoric calling for a return of corporal and capital punishment. They lap it up, unaware that it is the deranged ranting of a complete madman. As he walks through the House of Lords in triumph, his colleagues clap and cheer rapturously, singing Onward Christian Soldiers. Through Jack's eyes, he sees them as animated, rotting corpses, a dusty, decaying vision of hell, and a window to the inner workings of his mind. Later that night, for an encore, Jack, repelled by her earlier claim she loves him, murders Grace. Her death scream overlaps with a baby's voice intoning,
I'm Jack. I'm Jack. I'm Jack.
They say mental illness has hereditary components, don't they? Maybe the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. The Ruling Class is a film as crazed and off-the-wall as Peter O'Toole's central character, an often random but consistently fizzing scattergun satire that takes so many potshots that some are bound to hit the target, and some equally bound to ricochet wide of the mark to land impotently in no man's land without making a dent. I know people who love it, I know people who hate it, but I don't know anyone in the middle ground, or anyone who is indifferent. Always the first time, I suppose? Everyone who's seen it has an opinion. First thing to acknowledge, which is undeniable, the cast is top rate, and everyone nails their parts without a single bum note. O'Toole is awesome to watch. He burns with such bright-eyed manic energy, frantic theatrical ferocity, he's almost incandescent, able to describe madness, pathos, humour, sadness, and chilling malevolence at the flick of a switch. For part of the film, he's a dazzling crackpot showman let off the leash. When it turns darker, he transforms effortlessly into a sinister, aristocratic echo of his black-hearted Nazi serial killer from Night of the Generals. Not that it matters, but he got an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. I can imagine the audiences on Oscar night had a puzzling time wondering just how O'Toole got nominated for a film they'd never heard of or seen, because, let's face it, widely known The Ruling Class was not. He didn't win anyway, naturally. The supporting cast is fantastic, mostly farcical caricatures, but perform with such style and commitment you feel like standing up and applauding. But it's Arthur Lowe as the butler Tucker, who just about steals the show. He is absolutely hilarious and thoroughly scathing, and his physical comic timing is a thing of beauty and precision. During the reading of the will, when it is announced he has netted 30 grand, there is a dignified silence from the man. A full 30 seconds passes before he whoops in delight and launches into a joyous song and dance routine of old British music hall staple Gilbert the Filbert, whilst the others look on with astonishment. It's a great moment as decades of servitude to a despicable institution are gloriously stripped away, and it never fails to make me laugh, which has got to be worth something. So, great cast, great performances, but what of the film itself? It's longer than you would perhaps expect, over 2.5 hours. Although the runtime doesn't bother me greatly, it does drain it of much needed momentum, snap and punch, and it's not as light on its feet as it could have been. Some vital focus is inevitably lost. The camera work by Ken Hodges is very highly lit in some scenes, as if floodlights are being used. This is mostly in the first half of the film when Jack believes he is Christ, God of love. The second half is more muted, darker, shadowed, and this is probably deliberately so to signify the shift in tone and content. However, it can be a bit glary and hard on the eye early on. Score by John Cameron draws on standards like Pomp and Circumstance, 20s and 30s music hall staples, classic Christian hymns, along with some original compositions. It's a fair old game of sonic dress-up. Barnes adapted the screenplay from his stage original, and it remains a very theatrical piece. Not a Cinephiles film then. He incorporates elements cribbed from Shakespeare, Oscar Wilde, Whitehall farce, old Ealing comedies, and even a blast of Hammer horror. A lot of the dialogue, internal monologues, and interactions formulate as prose poetry or deadpan soliloquies, and dropping in spontaneous musical numbers every so often is a brave creative move that accentuates the madness quite effectively. For this is a world of monstrous insanity where ultimately no one is playing with a full deck. Considering director Peter Medak was a Hungarian immigrant, his firm grasp and understanding of the distinct idiosyncratic Britishness of the thing doesn't impress as stemming from the critical gaze of an outsider looking in. If you didn't know better, you'd swear it must have been directed by a native, someone like Lindsay Anderson or Ken Russell. Medak has flair and enthusiasm which he exuberantly splashes all over the screen. It was a passion project of his and one I think he was deeply in love with, an indulgence he treated indulgently. Which is all well and good, but what do we get from it? There's a very clever depiction of the self-fulfilling logic of insanity and religious beliefs wrapped up in one bang-on target line. When Jack is asked how he came to know he was God, his response, "When I spoke to God, I found I was talking to myself." Try arguing with that. It's a deliberately savage satire that doesn't spark all the targets in its sights, but it takes down enough, sometimes with a scalpel, sometimes with a sledgehammer. The upper classes reject Jack as a maniac when he's claiming to be the god of love, yet embrace willingly his later incarnation as a steely fascist elitist with a manifesto of extreme punishment for the masses if or when they transgress. He's just as crazy, only now he's their type of crazy. The juxtaposition is heavy-handed, sure, Christ or Jack the Ripper, but that doesn't mean it isn't flying true. Even Alistair Sims' clergyman claims that Jack's switch from Christ figure to his new persona has been an inspiration to him, renewing his faith in the church. The irony is hard to miss. Taking pause for thought, this is but one aristocratic family in one small island nation. Multiply it throughout the nation and the rest of the civilized world, though. These people, born of centuries of bloodshed and interbreeding, mad as shithouse rats, depraved, perverted and delusional, are running the fucking show. They are the ruling class of the title, and they still rule us today. The film was made in 1972 when the House of Lords was depicted as a desiccated cabal of overprivileged, unelected, brain-dead zombies, as seen by one of their own even. A fair summation. Calls for its abolition as an anachronistic impediment to truly democratic government were manifold even then. 52 fucking years on and we've still got it. And why? Politicians chasing peerages aspire to sitting there, belonging to it. Now we've got a new Labour government in place and given their overriding drive to feather their own nests and become titled lords and ladies or barons and baronesses, we're bound to be stuck with it. Up the working class, yeah sure, ride up it. Of course, these champagne socialists will never truly belong to the ruling class, because how could they? They lack the correct interbreeding, so will be excluded from the real club no matter what they do. But they can delude themselves at least, and the pay's good. To make its point, Barnes and Medak willingly interweave, merge and blur fantasy and reality, hence the initially shocking breakouts into song and dance. It's a wacky, zany universe that subverts and realigns expectations. But once that initial shock wears off, you buy into it. The gags and barbed missives come thick and fast. Some fall in flat, but it hardly matters, because for every one that falls by the wayside, there's another along in a moment that will be a fucking zinger. The jump from Christ figure to Saucy Jack is a quantum leap, but one that strangely makes sense, especially in a country that was still clinging to the phony nostalgia and rose-tinted vestiges of Victorian values by the time of Thatcher's dictatorship. She bloody loved them, so she did, and a lot of people bought it too. I can't say with any certainty who the ruling class will appeal to in the here and now. What I find most compelling and intriguing is the prescient nature much of its content has taken on. So much within its frantic, hell's-a-poppin' framework is frighteningly prophetic of the political, social, cultural landscape and mindset we find ourselves in today. You'll either love it or hate it, like it or loathe it, but if you watch it, it will say something to you in some way. Might not be something you appreciate or want to hear, but it will provoke thought. Not many of the films of today can lay claim to that. Thanks as always for your time and attention. Please feel free to do whatever you choose to do next. Hit like, don't like, comment, subscribe, check out my early access Patreon thing, or even make a welcome financial contribution via the thanks button. Uncertain why exactly, but I feel I've reached the end of something with this one. Maybe because I don't have anything planned for the next one just yet. Oh well, as the photographer said to the fashion model, come into my dark room and we'll see what develops. Later then, pilgrims.